I think we have everyone. Well, welcome everyone. I'd like to call to order the City of Oconomowoc Common Council meeting for Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Has appropriate notice been given?
Yes, Your Honor, it has.
Thank you. If we'd all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Shellpepper,
Here.
Alderman Fabianski,
Here.
Alderman
Here. Here.
Alderman Ellis,
Here.
Alderman Stevens,
Here.
Alderman Mulder.
Thank you. For everyone in the audience, if we have a session on comments and suggestions from citizens. As you enter, there's a little blue card. If you'd like to fill that out, we'd be happy to address those concerns at that time. Let's move on to the approval of the meeting minutes. Minutes dated April 21st, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And approved. Let's move on to comments and suggestions from citizens. Let's start with Lynn Wright from 707 Marigold Street here in Oconomowoc. Lynn, what we try to do is limit this to 3 to 4 minutes at the most.
If mine
So
won't
if you
even
will
go that long,
try to
so
be short, that would
Real
be
quick
helpful.
tonight. Real
Thank you,
quick
Lynn.
tonight.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
So I just want to start by, I got this, the Constitution of the United States that my husband gave me, and I was looking at it. I just want to read a couple of comments from some of our past presidents. Educating the people. A well-instructed people alone can be permanently a free people. James Madison. A primary object should be the education of our youth in the science of government. In a republic, what species of knowledge can be equally important, and what duty more pressing than communicating it to those who are to be the future guardians of the liberties of the country? And then I just want to remind everybody of this. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So what I'm also mainly here to talk about after this is Independence Day, 4th of July. I'm going to now refer to it as Independence Day, not 4th of July. Amen, okay? So it's our independence, and I think we all, after what we've been through the last 2 months, that Independence Day has a new meaning to all of us, and that I think every single person in America has, in one shape or form, has taken those freedoms and liberty for granted. And I, for one, will not allow myself, and do whatever I can to not allow the citizens of the United States to ever take them for granted again. So please, please follow Hartford. And I haven't been able to have time to look up who else has already confirmed that they will have their Independence Day fireworks celebration. I urge you all to please, Fowler Lake is the perfect place. People all around, you can social distance. Those who don't feel comfortable, they can be in their cars, they can watch from people's houses. And those who are really fearful or are elderly, really vulnerable, they're not, or sick, they're not going to come anyways. It's too loud for a lot of them, okay? So we need to start bringing people together. We are social beings. We need to do this. This virus isn't as deadly as we once thought. So please, thank you.
Thank you for sharing the comments. Erica D. Gloper, I'm not sure if I pronounced your last name right, from Harvard Street here in Oconomowoc.
Yeah, DeGlapper. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I've never been to a city meeting. I went to 23 or 25 facility advisory committee meetings for the referendum charade. May I tell you, it was not a pleasant affair to watch Epstein-Ewen and the people on the take be there from the very beginning to the pitching us the Vote Yes campaign to being the ones that benefited from it. I said to Roger Rindo, why are they here at this very first meeting? You know, why are the architects and builders here? We haven't even decided if we're going to build anything or what we even need. And he said, they're here to guide us through the process. They absolutely were. During the process, I bugged him many times, where can you cut your budget? He said, oh, there's nowhere we can cut our budget. You know, as I'm like pulling good furniture out of the dumpster and, you know, full on backboards that are worth $800+ it's just ridiculous. And if the city functions like that, you know, and I start coming to these meetings, you're not going to want me to come in here because it's ugly and this is gross. Our school district is $100 million in the hole. You know, when you add the interest, we were sold a balloon loan, and it's gross. And how are we going to pay for it? How much is this? Is the city in debt too? Are we even in debt more than even the school district? It's gross. Okay, so please, you know, that's chains on us as property owners. We're gonna have to figure something out. I mean, when you kill business, how are we as business owners supposed to pay our property taxes? And then I heard, oh, there might be a 1% decrease in your budget. I mean, I think you should all think like 50% minimum, maybe 30%. You know, at 50%, I think you should even try to cut your budget even more, 30%. What is really essential is putting up signs that scare little kids, all over 25 of them, 6 feet apart, stay 6 feet apart. Is that essential? 25 are made. I put in an open records request. I have no idea who put them up. There's no name. Whose were they? They were poorly written. They had bad information on them. It was poorly laid out. It scares little kids that are 3 and 4 that don't really understand. Is it scary to be 6 foot from my mom or not? You know, am I be doing something bad being within 6 feet of my mom? And the town of Oconomowoc, the city of Oconomowoc, put 50 of these up all over town, and they got wet and they started melting, and they're unbecoming of us, and that's really why I came here. 3 things. Those signs bothered me. I pulled them up. The police said, drop them. Then I said, these are gross. They're telling us what we should, as Americans, we need to assemble. It's essential, and they're telling us not to. It's anti-American. And whoever put them up, you shouldn't have put them up. And there's another committee, a response committee, that's going to blare out recorded music for 2 hours on Saturday and Sunday in this town. Are you serious? We have paid millions of dollars to train musicians in this town. Let's come together. Let's assemble noon to 1, Saturday and Sunday, with our instruments and actually play real music, make something. No more stuff. If we start blaring music, I like the Beatles, but I've heard them so many times, and sometimes I'll put the Beatles on and I'll turn them off because, like, oh God, I've heard them so many times.
If you can come to a conclusion, that would help.
Okay, it would help, but you know, there's a precedent when you start blaring music over town. I hope you rescind the decision. We don't do it. I'd rather have no music. We have beautiful birds to listen to in this town than music for 2 hours on Saturday and Sunday. Well, I guess that's basically it. You know, once you put businesses out of business, like I said, this is now your time to figure out how to cut your budget. And, you know, you should really, I mean, I was immediately when this happened, this is when one business shut down, all state pensions should have stopped. All government pensions, because government gets their money from business, No other place. You guys are, government is not making any money at all. You're putting us in debt, and it's dangerous for the long term. Thank you very much. Think about it. 50%, not 1-2% for this budget cut. Thank you for listening.
Oh,
Really
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Any other comments from the public? Then without objection, may I show a short video clip that Bob Duffy's going to show. Does anybody have a problem with that? Mr. Duffy? A short one.
What video?
You'll see. Go ahead. It's just a video clip of a promotional thing, what we're doing downtown.
Comments? Right. That
Got
was
it.
my
That's
question.
why
That was my question, because it's
Okay.
not on the agenda.
we'll do. Let's move on.
We can.
Got it.
You want to play it now? I can,
No, I mean, I asked, we went through this process, and this was an appropriate process, so if it's not a big deal, we can do it towards the end.
Motion made.
I'd like to make a motion.
Move it to the beginning of the agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to make that the beginning of the agenda.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So let's move on to the agenda items. Bob, can you show the video?
Yeah, yep.
Sorry, this was just something to bring some positive attitude towards where we've been. Thank you. Let's move on to number 6, a consent agenda item. Do we have a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move on to committee reports. Diane, can you give a brief report for the protection and welfare? Mhm. We are looking at 2 different components. One's consideration and act on accordance 200978 to create 12.18 of the municipal code regarding commercial quadricycles. Second component is consideration and act on approving application by Vino, et cetera, for to operate a commercial quadricycle in the downtown. We'll start first with a brief staff report, and the Alderman, the owner from Vino, is also here if you would like to ask questions before we entertain a motion.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. The city staff has drafted an ordinance regarding commercial quadricycles. We had received a request from one of our businesses here in the city, Vino, et cetera. They were looking at bringing a pedal tavern into the city to bring in some activity, something new for the downtown area. So since the city did not have an ordinance, we needed to start working on drafting one to regulate that. So city staff worked on that, Attorney Riffle worked on it, and we came up with an ordinance that we were comfortable bringing forward. Some of the main points in the ordinance are license requirements. There will be an owner-operator's license that is necessary, and also a taxi cab driver license that would be necessary, and that is to ensure compliance with the codes. Alcohol beverages are monitored by state statutes, so a passenger would only be allowed to have no more than 36 ounces of fermented malt beverage when they board the quadricycle, and no children would be, anyone under the age of 21, would be allowed on the quadricycle if there was alcohol present. The ordinance requires the police chief to recommend the route for the Pedal Tavern, and council would approve that route. There's also language for revocation and an appeal process if the license would be revoked. The ordinance, I think, is very comprehensive, and at the committee level, the Protection and Welfare made an amendment to that ordinance, and that would be to put a limit on the number of licenses we would issue in the city, and we would, that amendment was for 3 licenses. If we were to ever get more requests than 3, then council could look at that time. We could bring that back forward.
I'll move to approve the ordinance 200978 to create 12.18 of the municipal code regarding commercial quadricycles as amended at the Protection and Welfare. And for the public record, that amendment was Title 19, number of permits. The city can issue up to 3 permits citywide and only 1 per establishment.
Second.
Any discussion? Alderman Mulder?
I have a little bit of concern about this, where it's turning off of Worthington off of St. Paul is a third of a mile. That's moving at,
The ordinance is the ordinance, and then the particular.
Any further questions with regard to the motion on the floor or comment? Alderman Mulder? Attorney Riffle?
Mhm.
Liquor license. Let's get track that. Okay, makes sense.
Good question. Alderman Kavieski?
I'm actually very much in favor of this. I think it is a unique feature to the community. It is not the only one in the area, and because it's not the only one in the area, and we do have the business owner here, I was hoping maybe you could kind of share some of the history that drove you this way and some of the experiences that our community may look forward to if this is supported.
Mike,
Go to Mike.
please.
Thanks, guys. Hoping this is the fun part of the meeting, but the reason I did this is my wife and I have experienced a lot of this, we'll call it tourism downtown Milwaukee, and we would take our friends from our baseball club or what have you, and we go downtown, have a great time, get a safe ride back. And now when I purchased Vino, et cetera, January 2019, one of my first things was to drive traffic to downtown Oconomowoc. I feel like this is a great opportunity for people to come from Madison, Johnson Creek, Heartland, Delafield, and really start to patronize our businesses and help us all grow together. And let's take their money. So that's really why. And I'm a people person. I love to be around people and love to create events and activities for people. And my wife and I have been here for 20 years, and we love this town. And doing something in this location, I think, would be ideal for everybody and really great attraction for all of us. So I hope you guys all support it and something new for us.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
First, I want to thank Chief Berger for answering some of my questions regarding safety today. Thank you very much for that. A question on the music. Do we know how loud that can potentially be, and is that going to be some type of a nuisance?
Yeah, great question. The music will be controlled by the driver, and we'll set a volume standard there. And maybe, I'm making this up, but if there's like a certain like governor or something where it doesn't go exceed something, maybe we could do that, because I would definitely be interested in doing that.
Okay, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
absolutely.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Well, and I would just say in response to that, that I believe in the ordinance, it has to follow the municipal sound code as it is, so. Right, so it's regulated, and if it is a
So we
nuisance.
want to make sure
Oh,
that's
perfect.
abided by, yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely, no, I completely agree, yeah.
Thank you.
Alderman Kavieski.
Are there, as we consider, and I don't know if this would be for you or not, as we consider the route, are there stop points for potential bathroom breaks as on occasion that may be required?
Yeah, that's for sure. So the intent of it is, as they do in Milwaukee, they stop at 2 to 3 bars, and those are bathroom breaks. They also, if they'd like to have a water or they'd like to have a drink at that location, they may. But yes, that is the intention here. So on my packet, I did identify a couple locations that we could potentially stop at, that are safe locations to stop.
Yeah, I would say you are a people person. You came out of your shell really, really nice.
There's a motion on the floor and it's seconded. Any further discussion on this ordinance? Call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper,
I,
Alderman Kavieski,
Aye.
Alderman Rogers,
Aye.
Alderman Rozak,
Aye.
Alderman Zaffel, Alderman Ellis,
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg,
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye. Since this is an ordinance, do you, the council, waive the second reading without objection? Is there any concern?
I do have a bit of concern there. I'm sorry, can I?
No problem. Yes, please.
I don't know how the public feels about this, and myself as an alderman, I'd like to hear from them, even if we can hold it off for 2 weeks before we make a final decision. I would appreciate that, because I want to make sure that what we're doing is in the best interest of the community.
Leave it open for discussion.
I'll move to waive the second reading.
second.
Any further discussion? Roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper,
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski,
Aye.
Alderman Rogers,
Aye.
Alderman Rozak, Alderman Zaffel, Alderman Ellis,
Nay.
Alderman Spiegelberg,
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye. If we can move on to the second item, consideration act of approving application by Vino, et cetera, to operate a commercial quadricycle in the downtown. Any additional information to share,
Yes.
Ms. Conan?
The owner, Brian, brought in a new set of drawings or information, if you will, for his proposed business, so he passed those out. One of the changes he needed to make was an error in the route. He had it on the previous drawing that was in the packet, but it's also still the same on this one. It's showing that the quadricycle will end by entering the Chase Bank parking lot location and then going into the rear of the parking lot by Vino. His written information, it goes to St. Paul, and then it will turn left onto St. Paul and then turn left into the parking lot. So that is the correct route, the way it is written, not shown.
Any motion on the floor?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the application of Vino, et cetera, with the amendment to the route as written.
Second. Any discussion? Alderman Mulder?
So as I was saying before, I do have a concern with the route, and I understand it's perhaps the only desirable route in town, so I'm not suggesting there's another one available, because that's where people want to go and be seen and have fun. But it's a third of a mile from where it turns on to Wisconsin Avenue to where it turns off of St. Paul. A third of a mile based on the speed that they list here will take 4 minutes without a stop sign or without stopping for pedestrians. That's coming right out of where City Beach comes out. A lot of traffic there on Saturday, Sunday afternoons, people pulling boats. It can be very difficult to get out of that parking lot just because of the hill there. I talked to Chief very briefly. He felt this could actually have a calming effect. I'm not sure people pulling a boat out of City Beach that have to wait behind a pedal tavern to make it through town are going to be very calm. So I think we need to watch that this first year, because I do think it has the potential, you know, it will only take 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes to make that route maybe, so that's gonna be every half hour that could be going through downtown causing a 4 to 5 minute traffic jam. And there's no way to pass, and we certainly wouldn't want anybody to pass because it's pretty tight through there and there's a median before you get to Main Street. So I just think we need to be aware of that and watch very closely, even as we undertake this the first few weeks, to see what kind of hassle, because I could see this being a real, it could be a real impediment to traffic.
So are you proposing an amendment that all the aldermen should take the first ride?
Probably the first ride on each Saturday, just to make sure it's working.
Team building.
I don't like to work
Alderman
when I drink.
Shellpepper.
This is where I
I'm
feel
not
like
working, no.
at this part in the process, in the application approval, is this something where we want to wait to talk to the city and the community? I mean, I don't have a problem with approving the ordinance, but, I mean, we had talked about it in the committee meeting as to whether we wanted to, you know, actually get some feedback from the city from the community, from the residents. We weren't able to do that, but we were told that we're working under a time constraint. And so I'm wondering, what kind of time constraint are you dealing with? I mean,
If you'd come up to the mic, please.
Great question. So my time constraint was because I haven't marketed it yet, and it's more about filling the bike and getting reservations. So, you know, I'm willing to wait if to get the community to support it. I just need to, I want to start advertising it so I can sell some spots, and that's the time constraint I'm at. I understand we're in a pandemic and all that stuff in town, so no rush for me. I just want to start marketing it and talk about it. So that's really my time constraint.
okay.
Alderman Ellis.
I'm going to make a motion, once again. that
There is
we-
already a motion on the floor.
Okay. I was just trying to get the gauge, the feeling of everybody else in this and.
Motion, I'm sorry.
The motion is to accept the license. It's been seconded, and we're in open discussion. Alderman Rozak?
I'll just say briefly, I mean, I think we give these guys a shot. We did that with the beer garden and, you know, some of the open intoxicants during the parades and stuff. And all those things that we've tried have worked out pretty well. And, you know, I think Matt's comments were well taken. I think we just need to keep an eye on it. If it turns into a problem on the main strip, we know we just reevaluate it then. That's kind of my thought.
Alderman Zapfel.
I appreciate Chief Berger giving his input on this, and I'm happy to see Chief Bowen here. Just checking, Chief, have you conferred with the fire department in regards to the travel route?
No, we haven't discussed the travel route, Brad. I don't know, was there an issue with the travel route?
You want me to stand? Sure. Listen to the discussion and participate into them in the past. 6 feet.
Oh, man.
Past,
Recommendation.
I don't see anything, and I'm not super worried with what we have going on downtown normally.
We've dealt with the horse and carriage in the past during the holidays, and it really hasn't been an issue for us. And
Mr. Strayed.
it was a big issue.
Huge
issue. It can't let that go.
Are you sure about that, Chief?
Huge.
On horses. Alderman Kavieski.
Yes, just briefly, let's say this passes with the route that is recommended in the packet, and there's a problem. Whether it be identified by our chief or by the operator, what is the change process for that? Can you submit a change of route the following week for consideration to the council and act relatively rapidly so there's no interruption in business and we maintain public safety?
Yes, if the city is experiencing major complaints, or if the police department notices that there are some very, I guess, prominent safety concerns, we can certainly request that the applicant revise his route, or we can suggest or give him the revised route. This is obviously a first for the city, and the ordinance does not address every probably little conceivable scenario, but, you know, I think the owner and the operator would definitely want this to be something that continues, and he would be very willing to work with the city if we needed to change the route.
Don't work with the, you're not gonna give it to them next year.
That's correct. Because it's a yearly license, it's an annual license.
Oh, okay.
Alderman Rogers.
It's new, right? So we have to wear it and see how it goes. If it does, I agree with Chief Berger. To slow down the downtown doesn't hurt my feelings. I mean, sometimes we all need to remember to chill. And I'm sure I've driven downtown faster than I should have on occasion, or
Oh, really?
for sure. Not as elevated as you are, Kevin. I think it's cool. I think it's a great idea. It's a first, yes, so that's new, it's gray, it's maybe a little muddy, but ultimately, what's it gonna harm? It gives another reason to grab your friends or couples and go come downtown, and he's not solely providing for his own business, he's potentially sharing. Business brings business, so make a couple, 2-3 stops at other establishments for a potty break or whatever you wanna call it. And I think it's great. I agree. I think as far as route change, I don't know that I agree that it has to come to council. I don't know if that can just be an administrative decision. If it's something that needs to happen fairly quick, I guess that's my question. Would it be better served administratively, or does it have to come to council?
The police department did request that council has final approval on the route, so that was written into the ordinance. I'm not sure if there's any other reason that it has to come to council.
Great minds think alike. I raised that, and they said, staff thinks it should go to council.
All right.
Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper?
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski?
Aye.
Alderman Rogers?
Aye.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Zaffel?
Aye.
Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Aye.
Alderman Mulder?
Aye.
Thank you, Ms. Conan. If you can please stay there. Let's move on to new business. Consider act on resolution 20-R2878, granting new 2020 reserve Class B intoxicating liquor fermented malt beverage license to North 48 Lake Country Incorporated.
Thank you, Mayor. The city received an application for a new Class B liquor license. That's a full liquor license. The city has reserve liquor license left. Those are $10,000 initial fees, and then the regular license fee of $600, and that would be, renewal would be the $600 every year. They want to operate a lounge at the, on the first floor of the Mann Building at 102 North Main Street. There is a diagram in the packet that shows the layout and the seating. They're looking at basically 86 seats. They are very excited. They are hoping to open June 3rd. That is their target date. So, and they're on track to do that right now, of course, if council grants the license. They also meet all the Chapter 12 and state statute requirements for licensing. I would, like I have done in the past, I am recommending approval of granting the license, but on the condition that if they are not able to open on the June 3rd date, that council puts a timeline. So I would say if they are not open by June 30th, then they would need to come back to council for reapproval.
Any initial questions?
I'll move to approve the resolution granting the 2020 Reserve Class B intoxicated liquid fermented malt beverage license with the condition that they be opened no later than June 30th, and that if they aren't, they need to come back for additional approvals to council.
Second.
Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Rogers.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Zaffel.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item. Attorney Riffle, if you can lead the charge from a staff standpoint. First is to consider an act on pre-development reimbursement agreement for Wangod Partners Incorporated for Olympia Fields.
Well, I
Attorney-
think everybody recognizes and understands that we've been talking quite a while about this potential development. There's been a lot of work put in both by the developer in terms of trying to vet the thing and see whether it'll work, and also by the city staff and your consulting folks like Ehlers and Associates, myself, and your city engineering firm. This agreement would require the developer to reimburse the city for any expenditure of funds that are associated with supporting and furthering the analysis of whether or not this makes sense to the city. The agreement, as you see, has the first $50,000 being their responsibility. If the dollars that are expended by the city exceed the 50,000, then they will pay the next 50,000, next 25, and then the next 25 up to 100,000. Recognizing that if they do not agree to pay it, then we're going to stop working on it from a city perspective. And if it, I don't think it will exceed 100,000 in terms of our input into it, but if it does, we would stop at 100 and we'd have to have a new agreement. So essentially this covers the taxpayers' concerns with regard to expenditure of city funds associated with the analysis of that particular project. I believe that we have something on the order of $30,000 to $32,000 already expended. That would be reimbursed if you approve this now. It would also recognize that if this matter does go forward in a TID, all of those costs are covered through the tax incremental financing as well.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve the developer's agreement, pre-development agreement, rather.
Second.
Any discussion? Alderman Kavieski.
The process that we are putting in place, as you outlined, covering costs for pre-development, would that be something that you recommend for projects moving forward? That's not something that we've typically done in the past.
I think you need to analyze, this is me, you guys make the policy. If you want it to go from day one, fine. I think though, as counselor to you, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all situation. There's always a balancing test. You are analyzing as is the marketplace and as is every potential developer coming in here to see whether or not it makes sense. There's some testing that goes on. There's always going to be some staff time that goes in initially. There may be some engineering, legal, but when it gets to the point where it looks serious, absolutely, every single development from here on in.
Good. Thank you for the comment. Alderman Rozak.
Yeah, thank you, Stan, for drafting this. I asked a question a couple meetings ago about what the costs were outstanding on this, and I think this was kind of part of the part of the issue that drew us to get this agreement. I like it. I did review it prior to the meeting today.
Well, you drafted it.
Well, no, you drafted most of it. I just made a few tweaks to it. It's always easier to correct stuff than draft the original version,
Correct.
right? But no, it's good. I like, Lou's, your comment was right, spot on. I think moving forward, these need to be in place before we expend any money. I don't see why the city should output any staff time, especially outside staff counsel like attorney, like city engineers, like appraisers, without having this agreement in place. And I'd like to see that going forward. And I think that's something that we've discussed and that's going to happen. So I'm all in favor. This is good. Thank you, Stan.
Thank you for the comment, and a kudos to our finance director and to our city administrator for putting this in place quite a few weeks ago to work on some of the things that you guys have just discussed. Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Aye.
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 You forgot about Mr. Zaffel over here.
It's a little desks.
The kids' table.
We are rotating everybody, so pretty soon I'll be there.
So you'll be here next week. Be there next week.
All right, Mr. Riffle, if we could have you back again. The next order of new business is consider act on relocation order for acquisition of real property regarding potential development of Olympia Fields. Attorney Riffle.
In your packets are the proposed relocation order. Anytime you are looking at a redevelopment project like this that involves massive infrastructure, both in terms of road, sewer, water, storm sewer, electric, all of the municipal utilities and the potential for lands to be acquired that are related to that redevelopment, you need to start the process because we are a municipality. We can't just go out there and try to make a deal with somebody. You have to follow the requirements of, first, the Wisconsin Constitution, which says government can't take property without due compensation, and that is embodied in Chapter 32 of the Wisconsin statutes, which is our eminent domain laws. So this is the first step in the process. The analysis of this particular project is largely involving what, if any, dollars should be expended by this city through tax incremental financing to support the redevelopment of this large project. You can't get the information that you need to do that analysis unless you know what it's going to cost. You can't tell what it's going to cost to acquire the lands that are necessary to do the redevelopment without going through the processes I talked about in Chapter 32. So this is the first step in the process. The next step would be, if you adopt this, would be for us to go out and get an appraiser to value the land so that the landowner would be appropriately compensated. There are protections in the law, regardless of what our appraisal says. The landowner would have a right to get their own appraisal at our cost after we provide them with that information and after we provide the landowner with their rights that are set out in a pamphlet by the State of Wisconsin Department of Administration. So, step number one, if you want to go forward with this project, you got to understand what the costs are going to be. You can't do that until you go through this. And then we get that information, probably 90 to 120 days down the road, we'll have a good understanding of at least what this particular component of the cost would be. So, it's up to you to make a determination as to whether or not you want to go forward with this process. I'll stand for questions.
Would anyone like to bring forth a motion?
As a point of order, Mayor,
Yes?
within the actual packet, prior to this, we had a closed session,
Yes.
and there was information in there about the relocation order. I think that was all in the closed session packet. In our actual packet that probably was also put online, there is no relocation order in this to vote on. So
The
that's the point of
relocation order that came out of closed session can now be made public.
So, Attorney Riffle, would you share the two options that are under consideration for public
There's only one option
knowledge?
that's under consideration, and that is to acquire.
Correct, with our decision, yes.
Right.
If you would share that, please.
There is a parcel of land that is, here, can I borrow the? I don't have my phone, not that one.
Thank you.
This is also, well, it doesn't matter. There's a parcel that is CSM 1118, which means nothing to anybody, that would be potentially looked at to be acquired, that is, and in addition to that, some lands that are adjacent to that would be acquired, essentially, if you think about the drive in to the, in between Olympia and the Kmart complex, it's that area, if you would, that entire parcel, which it's partially.
Mr. Duffy, can I stop you for a second? Mr. Duffy, can you pop it up on the screen? I think it's only fair that people
Sure.
can understand it in the public forum, what we're looking at. It's difficult to understand where we are right now. So one moment, please.
I'm not gonna have that.
No, that's fine.
I'm gonna have.
Yeah, I'll be able to describe it, the yellow. Yeah, that's good.
Thank you. If you could speak to this image, that would be helpful. Thank you, sir.
What, they can't see this?
They can up there.
So you see the parcel here, it is outlined in yellow. It essentially encompasses the Pabst Road extension in from the east into, across 67, into the lands that are in between Olympia and the Kmart complex.
Bob, can you use the pointer, please, and just outline that for the audience?
Yellow.
Please.
May not. Oh, wait a minute. What's it?
Use a mouse.
Yeah.
Oh. There you go. Ooh, no, you got it.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy.
So the purpose of acquiring this property would primarily to be cleaning up a morass of private utilities that no longer function very well, to create a thoroughfare that will create economic development to the north and to the south and to the west. This would be the new gateway to the development of lands that were the former golf course, and also to support new redevelopment of the shopping center, and to support redevelopment of the resort that would be torn down and replaced with both commercial development along the right-of-way of 67, in the tune of, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 separate retail lots. And it will make possible for those to be serviced with both transportation, sewer, water, and electrical facilities, and storm sewer, as well as the residential development that could be developed to where you tear down the Olympia. That's the purpose behind it. There is a public purpose for this. There is no concern from my perspective as city attorney. This is perfectly appropriate if that's the position and the policy that this council wants to take.
Any further discussion or from the alderman, or questions for Attorney Riffle? Alderman Rozak.
So there's two things that I want to talk about. First, I will be voting against this for a couple of background issues, and also just I'm personally against taking personal property for these type of developments. But I don't know, and Stan, because the two resolutions that we had considered in closed session were part of the closed session packets. Now, you said we can make them public now, and I hate to be a technocrat on this, but nobody got a chance to look at these in the public before tonight. And so it might be something we need to maybe wait 2 weeks on, just for that very reason, because there are two resolutions with an outline and a meet and bounds description. I don't know that it probably still is properly noticed, but out of an overabundance of caution, I think we should wait to vote on it for that reason. But as to the substance of the proposal, I think we have to be careful to be kind of, I don't know, drawn in by bright, shiny objects. These plans always look good when they come to us. And we had a TID out in Olympia, Pabst Farms area, kind of in that same area. And there's still a ton of vacant land. There's still parcels that aren't filled. And by doing this, not only are we taking private property from someone else and essentially giving it to another developer, but we're going to be stealing from Peter to pay Paul. There's been a lot of promises on this property, including by the current developer, that we're going to be potentially taking land for, that has not come to fruition. And I've seen nothing in the materials I've been presented or that I've heard on this project that would make me think that previous attempts to do something there would be any different. Now, it looks great. And if something does go in there eventually, I think this is a fine plan. But it's the wrong time. I think it's the wrong developer. And frankly, we had a lot of smoke and mirrors in the last time we changed zoning for this developer. And we were made a lot of promises, including hotels and workforce housing, and none of that happened. So at this point, I'm voting against it for those reasons.
If I could make one legal statement, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
The city will not under any circumstances, in this particular situation or otherwise, acquire land for a developer, ever.
The other, so that's a good point. The other point that I'd like to just correct in regards to verbiage is that the city is not taking a look at taking land. The city is looking at evaluating the purchase of that property. The powers that the city has under eminent domain is the ability to acquire through purchase of that property at the appraised value. So from a public perception standpoint, from a reality standpoint, it is not being taken, it is being purchased. That to me is a big difference. I want to make sure that everybody in the public knows that it's not just removed. And this property owner, and the reason that we're talking about this and this path is the property owner and the is basically the estate of Edmund Basari, who did not leave a will, who has left the estate without clear authoritative direction to negotiate, to have private property or private developer negotiation occur. And this property would allow for the public infrastructure to be implemented to further the opportunities associated with the Olympia Fields development. The Olympia Fields development is one of the biggest opportunities this community and the city has seen since Pabst Farms. Now, I totally agree that what was presented to the community for Pabst Farms did not necessarily materialize in its form today. And it's my opinion that that's probably in the community's best interest, because what we were sold for Pabst Farms was a Bayshore style mall, which is currently under its second TIF because of its struggle in the ever-changing retail landscape. So I'm glad to see that that occurred or didn't occur. The developer for this particular piece is not guaranteed the extra lands associated with this eminent domain inquiry. We do need to act in good faith for what next steps could be, and we have discussed that. We will never see what could happen in this area, at least as long as I'm alive, possibly, if we don't take some action in a timely fashion. We do have a developer that has the wherewithal to move something forward. We have options that we have been shown. There is not a promise nor a guarantee of what option is moved forward. So I don't think supporting this is the chasing of a bright shining object, other than development of an area that is underutilized, underdeveloped, and undervalued for our community. And if done correctly, the increased value of this property, not only for the property owner that would go through the eminent domain, and for the developer that owns property there currently, would be a boom to the city's coffers with increased taxes. So now is a really good time, because we do have issues that we have to address based on the pandemic and budgets, to see what we can do to increase that tax revenue.
Alderman Ellis?
Thank you, Lou, and thank you, Mayor. I think we need to evaluate our options. The only way that can happen is if we begin the process of making a move. This is a blighted area, there's no doubt, there's no question in anybody's mind for that. I don't look at this as taking land. We have been debating this and talking about this now for the last 3 years almost. And we can talk for the next 3 years, the next 3 years after that, and 20 years later. I think it just becomes a time when we need to go ahead and begin the process of at least looking at our options. And I think we need to understand that. The one question I do have is, if this is approved, does that mean we're going to begin the process of going through the option of taking over this land? And also, I also want to make another, and then I'll be quiet, is this. A few years back, there was a place called Fong's Gardens, and they went ahead and they did an eminent domain, and I think that was the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life, and I hope that's on the records. I don't think we're going to be that boneheaded, to be quite honest. Okay? So if somebody can answer that question for me, and whether or not, if this is approved, what are we doing?
Attorney Riffle.
You're finding out how much it'll cost to get it.
Right. So in essence, we're not taking we're just finding the information to
Yes.
make the decision on what we might or might not do.
Right?
Thank you.
Alderman Mulder?
You brought up Fong's. I think it's a good comparison. That was a going concern with a local business person. This is vacant land by a family that may not even realize they hold it, and have no plans, never have expressed any plans to do anything with it. It is truly blighted, and without infrastructure, nothing will occur there. I think that's pretty obvious. I do think it's central to the continuing development of our city. I think we're going to need the housing that will eventually be provided in Olympia Fields, both single family as well as multifamily. And I think this is the first step in opening up that area to future development, and the increase in the value of that property this will provide could very well help free up those lands for additional development. So for those reasons, I'm going to support this.
Any further comment? Alderman Shell Pepper?
Well, I would say that, yeah, it's not taking the land. I mean, I don't, it's forcefully purchasing the land, though. We're not giving, necessarily an option to the owner of that land, so it's not taking it, but it's forcefully acquiring it in some sense. I'd also say that workforce housing is important, affordable housing is important, and that was what was on the docket when this first came to pass, when this was first presented to this council. What wasn't presented to this council was the roundabout and the condemnation of this land. And so those are the issues I have with it. I'd love to see the area developed. I want to see it grow. But the way that we're going about doing this, I disagree with, and that's why I'll be opposing it.
Alderman Kavieski?
Alderman Shellpepper, you're correct that this community does need additional housing options in an affordable position. And that's why I supported it as well, but I've also always been a large advocate for comprehensive planning associated with this area. We weren't able to work with the property owners to create a comprehensive plan in that frontage, primarily for the reason of Mr. Broussari passing away and no ability to have that authority from that estate participate in that, because the estate was looking to purchase that. So with the ability now to comprehensively plan that frontage with city infrastructure, with greater benefit, and with integrating various housing types within the western property, to comply with our comprehensive plan that was just adopted last year, that takes a look at housing cycles from affordable all the way through senior living. We have a great opportunity to put that in place if this moves forward. And those lands to the west of what we're talking about here are still owned by the Broussari estate, and I think they will find the opportunity to move that forward sooner than later if this moves forward.
Would anybody like to share a motion?
Well, I had another
Oh,
comment.
I'm
but
sorry,
yeah, that's
Alderman
that's
Rozak.
okay, yeah. Stan, can I ask you a real quick question that we discussed earlier? I believe it was all an open session, but my understanding that the developers of Olympia Fields had made an offer to Basaris for some portion of this land at some point. Isn't that true?
I heard that there were informal negotiations between representatives of Vanguard and somebody from the family.
And was there a counteroffer made?
There was indication from the person that is associated with the family that does not have any authority whatsoever that was verbally indicated back, and there were discussions, and Vanguard said, well, they're basically asking, 3 times as much as the value of the property.
So that leads into my final kind of issue here, which is, what I'm hearing is that I like what everyone has to say. I love the bright, shiny stuff, right? I love developing workforce apartments. I love the flow. I love everything we're talking about. Sounds great, right? Except you're taking someone's land, because what we're hearing is they're hard to deal with. We are taking it, however you want to say it. We're giving them kind of an option. We're going to appraise it. We're going to pay them for it, but we are taking it. So you can put it in any kind of rosy colored, bright, great project you want to, but that's the reality. And we're taking it because somebody somewhere owns land, somebody else owns land next to it that they purchased without knowing what they were doing, so that they can make more money. And then we're just gonna kind of close our eyes and say, oh, it's not a taking. It is. And we're taking it just because the guy that owns the other stuff, he's just kind of hard to deal with. Or maybe he's dead and his estate's hard to deal with. That's America. And you know what? People are hard to deal with. Sometimes people don't want to sell their land. Sometimes it's hung up in courts for years. And, taking it so that someone else can make more money and maybe develop it. Remember, we had a proposal from this developer before that they were going to develop the Olympia project as it is. We had promises, we had plans, and then those dissipated. And now we have a new promise and plan. We also have, part of the option is to redevelop the Kmart that they already own, that they haven't redeveloped. And the last thing I'll say that's very brief about the TID and Pabst Farms. Part of the reason that's still going and that those owners still own that out there is because we converted a ton of the land to ag after they couldn't sell it. And what could happen here could also happen, what happened there could happen here too, is that they can't sell stuff, they can't build stuff, and they want it in ag someday. So our tax increment takes, instead of 12 years, 18 years or 20 years to pay off. I think those are compelling reasons, and it is a taking. So we can say however we want, but we are taking someone's land because they're tough to deal with.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Thank you, Alderman Rozak, for those thoughts. Tapping into a couple of those, we might actually be doing these landowners a favor by paying them a fair market value for this land. Number one, we've heard they may not even know that they own this. And number two, they're sitting on it for what purpose? We may be actually doing them a favor by putting the money into their pockets for this property. I'm in support of this, although I would maybe consider what Matt had said, where a lot of this documentation was not available to the public, that we maybe table this for 2 weeks, and that gives the citizens a little bit more information and awareness of this.
Alderman Kavieski.
Matt, you did bring up several good points. The maintaining of property in the Pabst Farms area as ag isn't part of what we're looking at or discussing here. That property west of this area is still owned by the Basari estate, and I believe has been in a holding or an ag kind of zoning. So we're not getting any money off of it, and it's not being evaluated as part of the potential TIF associated with this and the value that could come about. Again, the ability to comprehensively plan this area is a critical element for our community. The gateway into that is a one-shot opportunity. I think, again, I supported the efforts associated with converting the Olympia Resort into apartments that were affordable, but this opportunity didn't exist then. It exists now. And evaluating the cost associated with that, because again, you know, we can agree to disagree in regards to the verbiage. I think Alderman Shellpepper hit it. It's a forcible sell, but it's a sell and it's a purchase, not a taking. To me, if you were gonna take it from me, you're gonna take the title, and you're gonna walk away without an exchange. And I think, again, that's really important for the public to realize, that this is a step in the direction to evaluate where we're going with this. It is our obligation as a council to represent our community as this develops. I would not recommend keeping the rest of that property in ag in perpetuity to the west of this. It needs to be developed to represent our community, and as we move forward, as we approve this, and approve it now, because, you know, timing is an issue. And I'm not saying that in the benefit of anybody but the community. We have waited a long time, and I don't see any benefit to waiting for 2 more weeks to evaluate the property cost and value associated with this. If we were doing a major commitment, I would agree. 2 weeks doesn't hurt anything, but what we're looking at is evaluating the value of this property. So for that reason, I'm gonna support it. I'm gonna support that we do that today.
Alderman Rogers.
I just have, does anybody know the financials? Are they behind on their taxes? Are they, this fictitious landowner that might exist, might not, or is everything current on this property? Yeah, like, are they behind on anything? Is it in
Wants to
arrears?
know if Basaris have paid their taxes.
That's all.
I don't know.
Nobody knows?
If they were, by 4 years, the county would foreclose. I know that they haven't. You know if they're current? Well, I know that there has not been a tax foreclosure. That would make our life really easy, because all we have to do is go to a sheriff's sale, and then we pick it up cheap.
I'm gonna move, so it's just assuming that it's all paid, it can, I mean, it's blighted, yes. It looks terrible, I get it. That's all we're working off of.
I'm gonna move to table.
Before you make a motion, are there any further comments? Alderman Shellpepper?
Last comment from me. I agree that we want to see a general comprehensive plan. That makes sense, but this isn't it. I mean, if you go out and zoom out, I mean, there is acreage surrounding this area. That was supposed to be the comprehensive plan with the Basaris involved, and that's not happening. And so I would just push back on this being the opportunity to have this general comprehensive plan, so.
Any further discussion?
I'm gonna move to-
Alderman Mulder?
So I think to echo what Lou was saying, though, is that all we are looking at here is to authorize an expenditure that will eventually be paid for by Vanguard to evaluate whether this piece of land is something that we want to acquire at the price we would need to acquire it. It isn't, and without this, no master plan can exist. When we do have a master plan, it will require this type of entrance to the property. So this isn't our shot to get it right or wrong. This is our shot to even figure out if we want to do it. It's just simply a step to find out what we're looking at.
I'm gonna move to table this item based on the lack of, I think, public notice and without the proper information being provided to the council.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay. So this issue does not get tabled at this point. We can either open up for further discussion or entertain another motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the evaluation of the identified properties value as outlined in our packet.
Second.
Any discussion?
Do we need to,
Alderman Spiegelberg?
so we moved from committee of the whole with the entire parcel. I just want to make that clear. I mean, we're.
That's
okay,
correct.
Yep.
Well,
Alderman Rozak?
yeah, my comment goes back to my motion to table, which I'm struggling with here. And I know it got beat, but with regard to this, these materials we all looked at, no one else has looked at. Nobody in the public has looked at.
So
Okay?
question for
So-
legal counsel. Legal counsel, does that put us at any jeopardy or contingent liability based on
No.
Alderman Rozak's comments?
No. No, I mean, the public can see what you're doing, you know, by asking to see it.
Mhm.
The other document, however, was done in closed session. You made a decision that is closed session material. Only the relocation order that you're talking about now is available to the public. It's like if you talk about in closed session, you know, we think this property, we can get away with paying them $100,000, but Riff will go out and offer them $80,000. You don't want to tell the other side what your bottom line is. You want to protect your taxpayers. So that's the rationale behind it.
Any further discussion? No. Call roll, please.
Nate?
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion
Got
passes.
everyone that time.
Thank you all. Let's move on to discussion and action on 2020 city budget impacts from COVID-19 pandemic. Our financial director, Lori Sullivan. Ms. Sullivan, please.
Thank you. I'm here tonight to give you an update to the financial impact that departments are looking at due to COVID-19 pandemic. A couple weeks ago, we were here. We were here to give you an overview of where we thought we were at that time, but also let you know that we were working on a more in-depth look at it. So tonight, I really wanted to talk to you more about that part. The pandemic, as we know, is fluid and ever-changing. And because of that, it's really hard to predict exactly how the virus is going to affect our everyday life. Administration, for that reason, challenged the department heads to take a look at their budgets and how they may react based on 3 different scenarios. And that was in the memo that I sent forth. So the scenarios really were based on safe at home and restrictions lasting throughout different, time periods throughout the year. So, even as we put that together, things changed just a few days ago. So this is an overview of departments taking a good look at their department budgets and thinking about how would it be affected, revenues and expenses, how would they be affected if the safe at home ends now, if it ends in another quarter's worth of time, or not until the end of the year. What kind of things would happen? What things wouldn't happen? How would your revenues be affected? So in your packets, I provided you with a summary of those worksheets, and I'll pull up. We'll start with the general fund worksheet. So what we did is similar to what we talked about at the last meeting. We had some watch lists. We had things that we were looking at, both revenue and expense-wise, and the departments each took a look at all of their revenues and all of their expenses that could affect their department based on the scenarios. So the numbers are up here for you, and the overview of that is that at the end of the day, the range of the impact on the city's budget is about a deficit of about 1.02% to 1.92%. And the numbers are up here. What I provided you with is the numbers that we came up with and also the major factors that were affecting, those numbers. So for revenue, as we talked about the other day, room taxes, building permits, community center income, interest revenue. And then the expenses the expense summary really here is except for in the case of the election costs increasing, these are all decreases in costs due to the fact that we're not providing those programs or there's no demand for those programs. So currently, the city is in a strong financial position and does have an unassigned fund balance of about $4.5 million. So we're sitting in a good spot. We're taking a look at an overall deficit of somewhere between $145,500 to about $275,000, depending on what happens. And as I said, things changed already again this week. So this is something that we're going to continue to monitor and continue to update you on. But before we get there, let's take a look at utilities as well. So this is general fund and what we're looking at, the effect for the general fund. But let's take a look at the utilities too. The utilities are a little bit different than the general fund. So they, we work on a year to year. We have a set amount of levy that comes in, a set amount of certain things that come in. The utilities, on the other hand, with the COVID pandemic, really we're not thinking so much that they're going to have a lot of changes in their revenues and expenses. People are still going to continue to use water and electricity, and we're still going to have to provide that service. But what might change is the cash flow itself. So we took a look at the cash flow. And first thing we did is we looked at how much cash on hand does each of the utilities have, and that's what the first part of your schedule here is. So if you take a look at what their cash on hand is, their dollar amounts are right here. This is what their budgeted operating expenses are divided by 12, so kind of monthly. So based on like wastewater, cash on hand, they have about 12 months worth of operating cash available to them should they need it. Same with the water at 9.3 and electric at 6.1. So we have overall about 7 months worth of operating income between the three utilities. So we take a look at that, and then our scenarios really were at this point taking a look at, collections where we're at right now. If we looked at scenarios, we honestly believe that about a 3% reduction in collections is what we'll probably see. But I put more, kind of worst case scenarios up there just to show you that at 3%, we're saying if there's 3% less, that cash available up here, we're going to reduce this 7.2 months by a quarter of a month, a week of operating cash. So even worst case scenario, we're at less than a month of operating cash that we would have to absorb at that. So let's take a look at collections and how that's working out right now too, real quick. That was at the bottom of your schedule. So we took a look at where we're sitting with collections, and while collections are, and excuse me, there's a typo in your memo, it says 96, it's supposed to say 83, just like your schedule. So the dollar amount that we are in arrears right now is about $83,000 higher than it was at this time last year. But when you take a look at the schedule, you'll see that the majority of those dollars are over 60 days past due, which means they were past due before the pandemic or the emergency ever hit. The reason that happens is because there's a moratorium on shutoffs for the utilities over the winter. And so we have, there are people that don't pay over the winter, but then once the moratorium's off, then they come in, make payment arrangements, and start making payments. This year, because of the pandemic, the PSC and all of the utilities extended that moratorium. So there were no shutoffs, there were no disconnect letters, there were no payment arrangements. That'll, come later. One of the things about this chart that I think is interesting is if you take a look at, yes, our total arrears is higher than last year, but the number of customers that are past due are less than they were last year. And what that's telling us is that the people that have always paid us are continuing to pay us. So we're not adding new customers into the delinquencies. So at this point, what we're saying in the utility arena here is we believe that they're going to be fine and weather through this just fine. So that's a quick look at the two scenarios here, or the two different fund types that we have, the general fund and the utility funds. So at this point, you know, we'd like to do is basically recommend that the department heads continue to look at their budgets, at their revenues and their expenses as they do every month, but more closely every month, and see how, you know, what's going on in their department, and look at the city as a whole a little bit too, what's happening everywhere. So we'd like to continue to monitor that and offer up, you know, monthly, I get you financial statements that are in your packet. I would add a memo to that to continue to keep you updated with where we're at and what we're seeing. And then, you know, as things move forward, if we really are seeing something happen that, you know, you need to talk about or you want to talk about, that we could bring it forward at that time. So with that, I'm open for questions.
Open for questions. Alderman Rozak.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. This is definitely helpful. So when you look at, and the chart that's up is perfect, when you look at the major factors on the side, and I want to start with the expenses, are these things that we have currently done, or are we just proposing to do things like eliminate travel, election cost increase, bailiffs? I mean, are these things that we've actually done to help eliminate these things, or are these just suggestions?
Okay, so what the purpose of these scenarios was, if this happens, what will or will not happen, likely happen in your department? So in the case of like bailiff and CSO, if the pandemic stuff happens, it continues, the courts are closed, there's less citations, there's no need for a bailiff because the court's closed, and some of those kind of things. So when we're talking about this, a lot of the revenues and expenses, you know, if the expenses changed, it's likely because a program changed, that there's no demand for that program because people aren't out and about and doing things. Like earlier when we were here 2 weeks ago, we didn't have any idea if the beach was gonna open this summer. Now we know it will. You know, there's certain things, community center. Now, you know, we thought people aren't going to be able to use the community center all summer long. Now we know that's not true. You know, so even though we have this up here and some different kinds of scenarios, I'm not saying any of these scenarios is actually going to happen, but we are taking a nice close look at how the outside forces are changing, you know, what we're able to put out there to the public and what it will cost.
Okay, so based on where we're at right now with the Supreme Court order, Governor Evers announced yesterday he wasn't doing any more orders. So we are actually should be in scenario one, right?
Should or could, because the scenario isn't exactly the same really, because at the time, nobody knows how long the restrictions, sure, safe at home is gone, but we don't know what the restrictions are or how much people will come back and start participating in the programs that we have. They may fill right up, they may not, we're not sure.
So,
And
okay, yeah, okay,
Go ahead.
yeah, no, I get it. So, but when I'm looking at the major factors, I mean, these are some of the things that I wanted us to start doing, is eliminating unnecessary items or things that were discretionary. So at this point, we're saying this is possible. We're actually in the blue, as far as I can tell, based on the current orders and the Supreme Court order. So are we not going to do any of these things, or are we still going to do these things? I'm confused. Are we just proposing that maybe we can?
Let me help a little.
Sure.
As Lori said, these were the department's best projections as to how we would be impacted with the restrictions in place. As far as what we're actually doing, there's a few things that actions that we have already taken. The first one off the top is training and travel. All the training and travel has been, I guess the best word would be restricted to requirements for our licensures and things of that nature. So as those requests come through, we're working with the departments to understand the actual need for that and trying to be very cognizant of what we're actually sending through for training and travel. And a lot of things, of course, are canceled or changed in venue and things of that nature.
So things like things like the park and recs, for instance, you know, program expenses, purchase services. Like we have a yoga teacher come in. We pay her or him $100 to do the class. We charge essentially $150 for the class or whatever it is. We're not purchasing the services, so we should be saving money there. like all the spring programs are pretty much done, right? I mean, they've all been canceled, they're all done, they're all over with. So we should have no expenses in that
And
area.
that's what staff has tried to do, is to reflect the revenue impact and the offsetting expense impact in that. So both of those elements are in there, Alderman Rozak. Two more things I know that you're potentially interested in as far as changes. We talked with the mayor, we will not be doing the sister city trip. I mean, that seems pretty obvious with the international travel, so that will be pulled back. I think we had 5,000 in the budget for that, so that will not happen. And then additionally, in Park and Rec, Bender Beach will not have lifeguards there this summer. That's a smaller space, you know, we're trying to look out for the crowds there, save staff time and expenses, and that's, you know, about a $9,000 savings there. So those are a couple of the things that, additional things we've done, but I think the most of the schedule is reflecting our best estimate as to the impacts of program attendance being down and the offsetting expenses that are attributed to that.
Thanks.
Alderman Kavieski.
Have we looked at continuing licenses and the revenue that generates, and maybe working with some of the businesses that have been impacted, liquor licenses and things of that nature, to maybe allow them to spread that out a little bit if need be? Obviously, their cash flow is impacted big, so if we can help that cash flow kind of catch up, it ultimately, I don't think would impact our bottom line, but it may impact some of the anticipated cash flow.
We're looking specifically at liquor licenses right now. Diane has done an initial analysis of that, and we've talked to the mayor just briefly about it, so it's something that we're diving into more as a potential item that the council may want to have a policy decision about.
They've pulled all that information together, and we've started to work on that. But very good point, and it's something we're looking at as a priority. Alderman Zapfel.
Can one of those scenarios be a similar policy to other municipalities of cutting liquor license in half, potentially?
Yeah, we're looking at different options as to fee reductions or whatever. So that's a policy decision, but we're trying to make sure we have the information pulled together well for you so you can make that decision.
Thank you.
Yeah, the information's there, but then you have to do the cost analysis, which it's there, and then what we want to do is present options to you so you can make those policy changes if you feel so inclined. Alderman Kavieski.
One of the other things that I mentioned previously were potential inflationary pressures. Any additional looks at that? I know that's like the crystal ball of all crystal balls, but that is starting to come up in some of the conversations I've heard from the pundits. So I think there's some validity.
Yeah, when we're looking at this, I think that our harder task is going to be our 2021 budget. So I think the inflationary pressures is going to be more of a conversation when we're diving into our annual budget for 2021. We're also, this year's budget is set. Next year's, that's when those different conversations are going to happen. What will happen with state aids? What will property tax assessments do, et cetera. So 2021 budget conversations are going to be, we're going to be talking about this more.
Alderman Ellis.
With that stated, there was an email I had received in reference to proposed assessment for property taxes. And I'm wondering what we're going to do as far as, especially with the pandemic, and the fact of the matter here is we don't know what the economic downturn, if any at all, is going to be. Is there a way to prolong, just kind of push this off, or talk to me here? What can we do to help our citizens?
The Common Council has nothing to do with assessment. It's all statutory, and it's laid out with the uniformity clause of the Wisconsin Constitution. That's why there's sort of a separation. Your assessor is a statutory officer and has responsibilities under the law to assess property uniformly. Now, to help your property owners, it has nothing to do with the valuation of the property. It has to do with how high you set the taxes. So that's in your lap.
I don't understand. You have to please
The-
be
the
more
If you want to do
specific.
something for your property owners, you got to lower their taxes, which means making hard decisions next budget.
The assessments, if you remember, is how you allocate the taxes across the different owners. So the assessments themselves don't impact the dollar that we're collecting on as a total for a city. It's the property tax levy that we're setting, and then how that gets allocated is through the assessments to each individual property owner.
Alderman Kavieski.
Kevin, I'm not sure if you were inquiring about the equalization.
Yeah, we have a RFP out right now
Right.
for a revaluation.
Right.
That will occur for 2021.
So we'll expend those funds in 2021, or will?
Yes, that would be a 2021 expenditure. So when we
So
get
that's-
those proposals back, that'll come to council for consideration.
So we're talking about this, what I had received was about 2021. It's not about this
Yeah, our
year.
assessment services for 2021, correct?
Thank you.
That's what that is. Mhm.
Any further questions, discussion, or any proposed action?
Yeah, I'll-
Alderman Rozak, please.
Yeah, I'll make one comment and then I'll move it. What Stan's saying is, when it's budget time this year, we need to make hard decisions.
Thank you.
And what we need to do is keep our tax rate low, because assessments might go up, and the only way to keep taxes from going up is to keep our tax rate and levy low, and to not keep spending money on things we don't need to spend money on.
Correct.
So I'll move that what do you want us to do, Mayor?
There's no
Approve?
action needed, it's just if you have any
Oh,
questions.
yeah, it's a discussion action, okay.
We just
No
wanted to
action.
give you the opportunity in case there was something you wanted to discuss. Anything further, Ms. Sullivan?
I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next agenda item. These are the mayoral appointments with council confirmation. Please note that in front of your microphone, you received a revised version. We removed the technology committee appointment, and we hope to bring those back and to finalize all the appointments in 2 weeks.
I'd like to move these, but I'd like to pull out, I don't know if you do these all together? Do we do those?
Normally, we do them all together, but if you would like to pull one out.
I would like to pull out the Architectural Commission appointments. And
Second.
discuss those separately.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a motion or not. I think I can just pull it out. I don't know if it needs to be a formal motion or not. Yeah, so I'll do that. That's a good idea. So I'll move to approve all the appointments from the mayor, and except for the Architectural Commission, and discuss that separately as a separate item.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll, please.
Aye.
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 Sounds good. If we could then address an Architectural Commission, I'll turn it over to you, Alderman Rozak.
So a couple questions. I know Kent and Jeremy, and I used to be neighbors with Jeremy, and I know some of these guys pretty well. Paul Schultz, is he on the Architectural Commission right now?
Mhm.
I had made a comment during our whole 517 issue
Yes.
that I was unhappy with the entire Architectural Commission finding a reason to not vote on something
Yes.
for a variety of reasons, whether they were uncomfortable or not. And at the time, I try to be honest to myself and follow through on things, even if it's years later. And I said I will not vote to reappoint individuals who felt that they couldn't be, vote on something. We have to make tough calls. Thackeray Trail was a real tough call. I had a lot of people in my district that were pounding down my door. And, you got to make a tough call sometimes. It might be uncomfortable. And if you're not willing to make the tough call, I don't think you should be on a commission.
I'd like to just refer this to Attorney Riffle, please. If you could give us a little basis for this, because we have new aldermen on council as well as a new mayor. So this was a surprise, so I would like to open up the discussion and with your support.
What would you like to know?
The issue at hand is the inability to make a decision on the 526, 516 property. And so if you could give the council a little background on that from your legal perspective.
Well, I'll just tell you the facts.
Thank you.
One of the individuals had been sending messages over social media or emails indicating that that person had already made up their mind. And they're in a position that they're in a quasi-judicial setting there, and I had to make the strong recommendation that they recuse themselves. I probably was a little stronger than I ordinarily would be, because my job is to keep us out of court, or if we are going to go to court like we were going to go there, to try to make it as much due process as would be possible. Then the other individuals registered concerns with regard to the fact that many of the people that were interested in that particular issue were their clients and their friends. And to a person, each of the other individuals on the commission indicated they felt they could not be fair and impartial. If you can't be fair and impartial on an issue, you can't sit in judgment on the issue. So they all recused themselves from that issue, because there's no way I could proceed to court if they made a decision, unless it was the other way, probably, that it would hold up in court. So we all had the discussion in an open meeting, and they all, said, yeah, I can't deal with this particular situation. To my knowledge, it's not happened in any other situation that's come before the commission, before or since. But on that particular issue, it did.
Thank you. Leave it open for discussion. Alderman Ellis.
I remember that that whole scenario, and I was a bit baffled at the fact that they could not make a decision. And like Matt said, sometimes you do have to make that hard choice. Win, place, or show, it needs to be done. And they weren't willing to do that. And what concerned me was the fact that now we have to pay to be able to arrive at an answer that ordinarily they would have or should have come to. So I don't know if I can do this, but I'm just going to say I'd like to take Paul out of that and just go with Kent and Jeremy and figure out who that third person is going to be.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
I think all three of these people have shown an ability to make some really tough decisions for this committee, for that committee. I think the 517 was a very unique situation, and one that, as Stan explained, put them in a position where they felt they had to recuse themselves. I don't see that they have any record of doing that in any other situations, and I think they've made some really good decisions for the city in their roles.
Alderman Zapfel.
This would be a question for Stan. So say we move forward with two of the individuals' appointments, and we held one person's and didn't yay or nay, could this person still serve? And if it came to a point, we call it on the agenda and we could go yay or nay on his appointment?
If you have a seat that an individual is not been appointed to replace that individual continues to serve until they are either removed or a new person is appointed. So, but I do want to understand the rationale where one of the individuals recuse themselves, and, well, it doesn't matter to me, whatever you want to do. Every one of them recuse themselves.
Alderman Shellpepper.
Yeah, that was going to be actually my point in question, is why we're only picking the one when all of them recuse themselves, but one did over social media. It sounds like communicate his or her vote ahead of time. So would be the reason why we would pull that one individual out? Is that what the reasoning is, I guess? I'm trying to ascertain that.
Does this topic need to be readdressed in 2 weeks to give us more time to do due diligence?
I think your planner
Oh, Mr. Gallo.
I can shed a little bit of light on that vote that took place that evening. The three members that you're voting on this evening all recused themselves from the vote. The other two that are on the commission right now, and that would be Kurt Schrang and Ann. They never got to them because there was already 3 votes to recuse themselves, and at that time, it was determined that this is being voted, that they cannot vote, that there was not enough members left over. There was only 2, so they didn't have a majority of votes to carry on. I remember at least one of those members said, well, geez, I would have voted on this, you know. There's one other thing I wanted to just remind the council on with this architectural commission. It's a specialized skill, and the ordinance does state that they have to have background in architectural. We have 4 certified architects on the board and 1 with background in building. They don't have to be members of the city residents. That's one of the few committees that I'm aware of. But they all have connections to the city. Most of them live here, and the others are own property in the city. So it's a challenge to replace them, to find someone with a background in architecture in the city. But you do whatever you want. We'll work around it.
So I think we've had quite a bit of discussion. Let's continue and see if we can get to a resolution or a direction if possible. Alderman Ellis.
I'd like to make it, I'd like to see this tabled for 2 weeks. I think we really do need to think about this, because I think at the end of the day, first off, I was wrong. I thought it was just Paul, but you are correct. It was also Kent and Jeremy that recused themselves or would not make that decision. And I'm not ready at this point in time to make a decision on whether or not they should be on it.
Alderman Shellpepper.
My concern is what Jason had mentioned. Do we have replacement? I mean, can we identify a replacement? Because that's what I'm getting hung up on. I mean, it'd be great to say, yeah, we don't want you on the committee. I mean, I appreciate their service. They're volunteers. I get it. I mean, I appreciate that. But they didn't, step up when we had to make that tough call. We ended up getting, an independent council to take care of it, which cost the city money. And
Well, they reclused themselves because they felt they had a conflict of interest.
right.
And so I think that's the appropriate thing all of us should do when that happens. So I'll make a personal comment from the mayor's office, is these are high-quality people specializing in doing this type of work. I sat with them in the last architectural committee. I was very, very impressed. And I think we need to be careful in the message that we send as council to all of our volunteers in our committees. If there is a very strong reason that we should do something different, that is your choice, not mine. My recommendation still stands, and I strongly recommend that you approve these 3 people. Also, think about how they're going to feel when they hear this. They may just recluse themselves and leave. And these are really high-quality people. So it's in your hands, folks, and Alderman Mulder.
To your point, Kevin, I don't know what in 2 weeks I'll know differently without meeting the 3 individuals personally. I can only go on the recommendation of what I've heard tonight. And Alderman Rozek, I do understand it is frustrating to have that happen where we need to move things forward and we can't. But I share your concern that finding 3 people to replace would be difficult. We're doing some really unique and wonderful things, I think, with our architecture in the downtown area especially, and the continuity of people on that committee will ensure that that continues. And I don't want to bring 3 new people in to try to pick up where we've left off or give new direction that may not be in keeping with what's been happening already.
Alderman Kowalski.
Were there any candidates that were found not to suit the requirements for any of these positions that came forward?
There was not, and what I did on most all of these is I reached out to the chairman or to the department heads to get input and feedback. I spoke with both chief fire department and police department with my recommendations for that appointment. So I'm comfortable that I did my due diligence. I can categorically tell you that the chairman of the architectural committee, I've known him for about 30 years, high quality individual and really cares about our community, and somebody that we are lucky to have as a chairperson. So any further comments? Yeah.
Just very briefly, I actually didn't expect this to be really highly debated, to be honest with you. It's just something during that debate, and during our having to hire and expend city money, my understanding was that there was not completely valid reasons for conflicts, and that one person had pre-decided, as we discussed. And that's something we shouldn't expect. And frankly, for these three guys, I told you, I know Jeremy personally, we were neighbors. I don't care what they feel like. If you're posting on social media pre-deciding things and then you have to step down, or you're stepping down because of perceived conflicts or friends are involved, that's a problem for me as an alderman, as someone that's confirming the appointment. So I honestly didn't think this was going to be a big debate. It's just something, when it all came down, I said, I'm not voting on them for them again, that recused themselves. So that's where I stand. And, you know, I do value their service. I think they're, you know, they've done pretty good work, but on this one, I think they dropped the ball, so.
Alderman Mulder.
Well, I'll make a motion to accept the Architectural Commission panel as presented by the mayor.
Second.
Further discussion? This one we should call for roll, please.
Nay.
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 Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the appointments were not confirmed. We will review this and bring new appointments to you. Let's move on to staff reports. Very excited to have both Chief Bowen and Chief Berger here. We thought it was important, there's a lot going on, that we shared with you from a public safety standpoint where we are today. So we'll turn it over to these gentlemen. Thank you very much for staying late tonight and joining us.
So as the mayor said, our common goal is public safety in the community. You know, we work separately on a lot of things, but at the same time, we work together on several things. So we
Can you
just
get a
wanted
little
to run
closer
through-
to the microphone, please, Chief? Thanks.
We'll pass it for it. So we just wanted to touch base on some of the things we've done together and individually as well. Here's our two emblems, and with that, turn over to.
All right. So the first thing with anything in public safety is preparedness. And that starts with open communication, the spirit of cooperation. We do different jobs, but we also share a lot of responsibilities. Same thing with trainings. We both work on NIMS and incident command management programs. We've done different tabletops together. Something that started last summer was the closed pod program, which is the point of distribution for vaccines or medications in the event of a pandemic. That was pushed out by the federal government, CDC, and rolled into public health at the state and the county level. Western Lakes is one of 4 locations that is a closed pod distribution site in Waukesha County to help relieve some of the pressure. So Chief Berger, Mark Fry, and I have been working on that point of distribution if we get a 24-hour notice to activate that. Emergency management plans, policies, procedures, making sure that we have adequate supplies. That was one of the things that we saw through this pandemic is the hospital systems, EMS, didn't have an adequate supply of reserves. The strategic national supply was also depleted. So a reminder to all of us that, you know, things don't come overnight. And then late last fall, we started with the number of skilled nursing facilities in the region. They were reaching out to our staff to help with their disaster plans, review of escape routes. We had an incident where we had some skilled nursing facility had a gas leak at 2 in the morning and we had to evacuate it. How do you evacuate one of those facilities? So we actually started a healthcare coalition to work through those together and provide input from law enforcement and fire EMS and practice that as a region. That's actually been super helpful because we had those relationships already established for about 6 months before this pandemic started.
So we're just gonna run through the timeline real quick, because as we all know, it came pretty quick. So on March 11th, WHO declared COVID-19 being a pandemic. The 12th, there was a district-wide memorandum to all employees and municipalities with guidelines. Then there were a number of state emergencies declared. Governor Evers on March 12th, President Trump on the 13th, and then municipal leaders began making declarations on March 15th. On March 18th, the district created a Waukesha County EOC, or joined daily EOC at Waukesha County, and on the 20th, we had the Western Lakes Emergency Operations Center was established. So our joint response. So fire EMS and law enforcement began having conference calls regarding emergency response guidelines and protocol changes. As a result of the pandemic, you know, we both had to make significant changes in our previous practices. You know, we established memorandums of our best practice and guidelines, released them to employees and municipalities, and those are endlessly changing based on the information that came out of the CDC, Waukesha County Health, and the state. You know, and then we did our municipal PPE and supply needs assessments on a weekly basis to see what we could get. When we look at the PPE supplies, you know, Brad talks about how difficult it was to get PPE supplies. You know, we were both on different pecking orders on the list, but we worked together to get the supplies we needed. On March 20th, our joint emergency EOC was established with daily email notifications and Monday, Wednesday, and Friday conference calls. And it was jointly decided to close municipal facilities as things began to ramp up. We did a joint decontamination process and PPE sharing, see who needed what, and we worked together to make sure everyone had what they needed. And then we provided guidance for several businesses regarding safer at home. You know, we did that from the onset of safer at home. We continue to do that now. People calling us, asking us what they should do to be safe, whereas before they were calling us asking why they couldn't be open or what they needed to do to be open. And then municipal election supplies, and then we had the healthcare coalition interaction, you know, survey the needs and status of different facilities, stayed in contact with them, let them know if there's anything in need, let us know. And then there was weekly updates with the healthcare facilities regarding policies and needs.
Our joint response continued. Talking about the supplies, many of us had a stash of them for our normal day-to-day operations and a short-term pandemic. What we had to do is submit for supplies through the Strategic National Supply. That was a cumbersome process that was changing literally by the day. We would get a phone call that a carrier was showing up in about 24 hours, and there had to be somebody on site to accept that delivery, otherwise we were skipped on that. We did receive about 1,000 surgical masks, 250 N95, and 100 gowns through the Strategic National Supply, which was critical because that delivery did not occur until the beginning of April. And our 2 to 3 week initial stockpile that we all kind of pooled together was running low. We were down to days on end of supplies, so that bought us some time. Immediately back when the WHO declared the pandemic, and even beforehand as we were monitoring the pandemic in China, we were placing orders for supplies and equipment. Having lived through the H1N1 pandemic in 2009, well, that didn't reach pandemic level, but that incident, I knew what it was going to take to get the supplies. So our staff, the police department staff, worked tirelessly to contact different distributors. We had placed an order for 3,000 masks that still continues to trickle in due to the shipments being delayed from overseas, and also the tiering. So the federal government right now has first dibs on anything coming in. It's not coming out to us. Same thing with N95 masks, gowns. Basically trying to have a 3-month supply. We didn't know when this was going to end and when phase 2 is going to come back about. Hand sanitizer, you know, within a couple of days we couldn't obtain that, and we knew that we had the elections coming up. Luckily, and I think we both want to publicly thank the residents and the community as a whole. We had businesses that were closed down that had the masks or had sanitizer that were delivering it at our facilities. And we basically created a central distribution site to get things to the city halls, the municipal buildings, public safety, for all of that equipment that was donated. We had 2 distilleries, one in Cambridge, Wisconsin, and one in Harvard, Illinois, that donated 20 gallons of hand sanitizer each. And that was bottled up and shared with all of the communities in the region of the Western Lakes Partnership for the election. So that was instrumental.
So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking specifically about the police department. Since we are considered critical staff, our entire staff worked throughout the pandemic. We ended up going to platooning for our patrol shifts, meaning they worked 7 12-hour days, and then they had 7 days off. That way it minimized their contact with other people. They spent all their time on the road. They weren't allowed back in the police station. We locked the police station down, basically. You know, we established PPE and health protocols following CDC guidelines, which changed, it seemed like almost daily, that we were redoing guidelines and communicating as to what we needed to do. We established the station sanitizing directives. They were sanitized in every shift. And then working with Western Lakes, we were able to come over and decontaminate our squads daily or after a transport of a prisoner. Call response plans were changed to maximize social distancing and comply with the jail and court restrictions. The court told us any municipal writs, in other words, warrants that were out there, they weren't going to honor. So if we'd have a warrant on somebody, we couldn't take them into custody. The jail was very specific about who they wanted in the jail or did not want in the jail, so we had to work out other options as far as that goes. And then later on, we worked with other city departments to provide guidelines and appropriate PPEs. You know, we had our weekly, initially we met twice a week and talked as department heads, had our EOC, and then later on we went down to once a week, and we would talk about guidelines, we talk about moving forward and planning for the future. And when they did start opening up this past week, we wanted to make sure that they had appropriate PPE to keep their employees safe. And then working with Lori, Lori's working on our city FEMA grant funding.
With regards to the fire district, a lot of the same similarities. Our staff, the fire board made an executive decision to declare them all as emergency essential workers. All of our staff did work throughout the pandemic. To date, we did not have anybody contract it. We did have 3 employees self-quarantine, living with people or being in close contact with people that did test positive. We were changing our policies daily. Every day at the end of the day, Assistant Chief Harriger would put out a memorandum regarding the most up-to-date policies and procedures on our response to calls, patient care, treatment, and PPE guidelines. The district's medical director, Dr. Katie, participated in all of these conference calls daily with our staff, and also joined in on the majority of the joint EOC conference calls to provide his expertise as a local emergency physician. We did the daily disinfection of our vehicles, our equipment, and our facilities. We were working hard and diligently on the procurement of our PPE, looking out for everybody, not just the district, the partnership, hand sanitizer, cleaning supplies, etc. We also, part of the response with emergency response on our dispatch plans was there's 4 different levels of a pandemic. The pandemic response plan was implemented for EMS. We started at level 0, which was starting the screening process at the time of the 911 call. We did move to level 2, which is where calls were actually being dispatched as a pandemic type call. And that was for people that showed signs and symptoms. We were prepared to go to level 2 or up to level 4, which would have been reduction in our emergency response. You would have seen like our staff cars going to people's houses first, evaluate and determine if they had to go to the hospital. 411 was utilized for residents to call and get screened initially instead of calling 911. So that was the surge plan as well. We saw our general call volume decrease 30% from May 15th to March 15th to May 15th. So that does affect our revenues. That is something that we're working on as well, as balancing our budget for the rest of the year. The fire board did accept, we did get a CARES Act payment for the decreased ambulance revenues. And that was an action that the fire board had to take to accept those funds from the federal government. And then we did put in for a secondary request for that funding based on our decreased revenues for those 2 months. And we're also working on the FEMA funding assistance. All right, so our local situation as of 5/17. You'll see at the top of the chart, that's a chart that's on the Waukesha County dashboard. If any resident or any of the council members are interested, Waukesha County has a dashboard up that to keep up to date with the daily statistics, as well as the number of positive cases that are in each municipality in Waukesha County. So that's the number that tested positive. It doesn't break it down into the number of active cases. Right now, in the city of Oconomowoc, there was 13 positives as a whole. Unfortunately, one fatality, and there is currently one active case in the city of Oconomowoc. Overall in the district, there's 10 cases that remain active out of the initial 33.
So we just want to touch briefly on the Oconomowoc Responds. You can see the community involvement with the Coco's Restaurant, Western Lakes Fire Department, and elected officials and other prominent people. Just want to touch base on that. It raised over $6,000 for reusable PPE, and they served about 2,100 meals.
Did the rock, did you do that, Brad? Did you color that rock?
Oh, those rocks were
showed up
by residents.
You can see we have two that showed up outside the back door by police department. The one that's missing is the one that looks like a donut. I have no idea.
I have no idea where that was. So community engagement, you know, this was a unique period for our residents, our community, but also our staff. This was, with the daily changes and life changing for them at work and at home, was challenging. So we worked together on this, assisting during periods where we weren't on calls, doing birthday drive-bys. We know that our healthcare system is critically important, our skilled nursing facilities, our specialty care facilities. So we jointly did it with our 3 police departments that we work with. Is we scheduled a drive-by at the beginning of Nurses Week to show our appreciation. And that was very well received. As you can see, some of the residents even popped, all of a sudden their windows opened up, and we were lucky to have musicians play the Star Spangled Banner as part of that. Even one of our explorers found an Easter bunny suit for Easter and asked if they could volunteer their time and bring some cheer to the community while doing social distancing. So.
And then with everything in public safety, we always look at after action and what we could do different, what we could do better. First thing I'd like to point out is that we've always worked together with the Western Lakes Fire District, but the pandemic has given an opportunity to work even closer together and determine different things and work together on different projects and how to make things better. And you know, moving forward, I think that's going to be important. But you know, what we have worked on is the reopening guidelines, you know, assisting the community to re-engage, working on that with the mayor. You know, we decided we're gonna be doing some increased joint training, be it CPR, AED, Narcan, Stop the Bleed, Active Assailant, Incident Command, Unified Command, and EOC operations. PPE, mask fit testing, that's all things that we can have done with the Western Lakes Fire District. We don't have to go outside of the Western Lakes Fire District to have that done, which would be important. And then we'll maintain a supply inventory. I know from the police perspective, we had to maintain a supply of masks, gloves, et cetera. And like Brad said, we didn't anticipate needing a supply greater than 3 months, and we sort of scrambled at first to get adequate supply, but we were able to fill that. So we're gonna have to sit down and figure out a burn rate as far as what we would need in a future pandemic and plan for having that on hand. Ongoing actions, you know, Brad touched on the pod preparedness. We're working on that now, getting some information together. It would be a huge undertaking to do it, but working together, I know we can complete it. We're looking at policies, procedures, and guidelines on disinfectant cleaning, sanitation, elections, and virtual abilities, and then annual vaccination abilities if we would need to do so. Want to add on that? Good.
No, I think we did it.
Any questions from the aldermen? Alderman Kavieski.
Not so much a question as an observation. I did see police vehicles at the fire stations more often than I had seen in the past. The evidence of you guys working together in the community was reassuring. I would use that word very comfortably. There is always, oh, what did they do and what do we need to do? And the communication that you guys provided through the channels that you have established really helped our community to understand what the expectations were and how to meet those. So thank you very much for you, your staff, all of those who put themselves into a position to help our community in ways that make our community an example for others to follow. And hopefully we don't have to do it again anytime soon.
Alderman Rozak.
A great presentation, guys. Chief Berger, how do they like the platooning? I mean, that sounds pretty awesome. 7 days on, 7 days off. I mean, it sounds, I mean, I work 12-hour days and I gotta go back to work on Monday still. So
I would enjoy doing platooning. I think some of the guys would like to do it, but the 7 days on got to be
tough,
a bit too much.
Yeah.
Because like I said, we made them stay out in their squad cars for the most part. Traffic was decreased.
Right.
We set, different standards for call responses, so they were pretty much in their cars, and I never saw the city so clean. We didn't have any rubbish on the curbs. We didn't have any garbage cans out there.
it just seems interesting.
It
I mean,
worked out great.
I never knew that I mean, that's a great, it just seemed very interesting, and I was curious what I would love it. I think that's, it's like a lot of full-time fire guys do that, like 3 days on, 2 days off, or whatever.
Alderman Ellis.
I want to thank you both for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, and we appreciate it. Let's move on to our next agenda item. We're finalizing or coming to reports and comments from aldermen. We're going to try to keep these at about 2 minutes. If someone would like to go first, it doesn't matter to me. If anybody wants to start off. Alderman Ellis.
Yeah, we've got a really important day coming, and it's Independence Day, and I'd really like to see it. I guess at this point, especially understanding the pandemic and the staying at home and 6 feet and things along those lines, there needs to be something positive to happen, because I believe that mentally we're all kind of running kind of scared in a sense. And I believe this could be a good time for us to remember our independence and to make it as normal as possible. I don't know what we need to do that, but I'd like to entertain some way, shape, or form to be able to do that.
Thank you. Let's go around the bench if that's okay. We'll start with Alderman Rozak and then just go around the horseshoe for efficiency.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot, but a couple quick things. I noticed in this weekly memo that the library is not open yet, and I'm curious, as far as just a comment, why we're opening everything else up and not the library. So if somebody could answer me that coming up soon. I was going to congratulate Mark Fry. He's not here tonight. I've been working with him and the mayor on a couple of issues out in my neck of the woods. Debris piles, road abandonments, rock pile issues, and crosswalk markings in our connection between Newman, and we've made some good progress in some of these items and hope to finalize those soon. And then I'm hoping to bring to the Protection Welfare Committee, in the next, I don't know, month or two, some additional items to address, including some potential ordinance changes, and hopefully everyone will be receptive and interested. So thank you, Mayor, on the rock pile stuff.
You bet. Mayor, or Alderman Rogers.
No, I got nothing.
Alderman Zappel.
Pass.
Alderman Mulder.
Real quickly, I think it's really exciting to see the city opening back up and seeing the number of people that are now out, and hopefully we continue to do so safely. I think the next 6 months pre-election are going to be very contentious in this city from what I'm seeing on social media just about opening up. There's a very strong partisan opinions in the city, and I think it's incumbent on us as a nonpartisan board, committee, council to, do what we can to remain that way and really help the community foster communication without some of the really negative things I've seen on social media, because some of it has been really, I think, beneath what this city should aspire to. Nobody personally here, of course, but I think we should set a really strong example to be positive in our communication, regardless of political viewpoints.
Thank you. Alderman Kavieski.
I just have a few notes here to go over.
Time.
Yeah. We do have,
Just so you know.
got it going, right on.
To say, I
Yep.
always watched him at, earlier council, he had this little clock for Mayor Nold, and I was kind of jealous. Would you do that for me?
Yep, you got it, yeah, he expedited it. Beyond the 4th of July coming up, we do have Memorial Day coming up, which is a day that we honor those who have served this country in the past and lost. So I believe in the memo today, it was confirmed there is a honoring at the cemetery. We're not doing a parade. Just keep those who, keep everyone in your prayers in regards to that. And if we can find a way to bring some excitement with the 4th of July, that would be fantastic. The fireworks is something that our community always enjoys, and it would be kind of cool to see maybe the fireworks, if we could coordinate that to launch them off the hill. Maybe that would give the city as a whole an opportunity to see them.
That's outstanding. I like that idea.
I thought we were going to do it to music. I was getting worried.
Well, whatever works. The way that this community has come together to support our downtown was and continues to be amazing. And to echo Alderman Mulder, everybody's going to engage back into normal in their way. When you see people with masks or without masks or however that is, be respectful and we'll get through it together. That is a good way to move forward. And in conclusion, next.
Oh, thank you. Just a quick note for clarity. The American Legion is meeting tomorrow, so we don't have all the details for their plans, so I want to make sure that we don't say anything that has not been fully confirmed. But again, I echo the same thing of the importance of both of those days. Alderman Shellpepper.
Yeah, I was just going to say, kind of like Lou said, we have an important day coming up, and it's Memorial Day. And, having served for 6 years on active duty, served in Iraq, lost men in our brigade, it's an important day that we all, really remember and thank those who made the ultimate sacrifice in the service of our nation, because that's what the day is really about. And so I'll say thank you, to all of those who we lost. So you will not be forgotten. So.
Alderman Shellpepper, ready? Go. I mean,
No,
Spiegelberg.
Spiegelberger, remember? Right.
Spiegelberger.
I just have one comment to say. I am very sad that the majority of this council just voted to oust 3 very qualified individuals from the Architectural Commission. And they're going to be very hard to replace. And I think that no, I won't say we, because I was not a part of that. I think it sends a very powerfully negative message to this community and individuals who want to serve in these volunteer capacities. And I hope that if Alex covers that vote for the newspaper, that he will specify which alderpersons voted to oust them and which ones did not, because I don't want to be lumped into a comment that says the Common Council voted to oust these 3, so.
Thank you. We'll finish up with the last agenda item, which is comments from myself. I would strongly echo Alderman Spiegelberg's comments. I'm not going to repeat them. What I do want to do is compliment everybody from a very lively discussion from the committees we had earlier to today, and caution us all that we need to look at both the forest and the trees in our decision-making process. My job is to help bring these things to you, help bring as many facts to you as a policymakers, and I will continue to do that. We need to really think through on some of these decisions, and I enjoy the diversity that we have in this council because it's really representative of our community, and I think we can do some really great things with open, candid conversation. So with that, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.